one of our CDC moms, and we talked about inviting her husband here tonight, and that's who we have here tonight, James Mavis. And thank you so much for coming. And we just kind of wanted to give you the floor and hear a little bit about you and kind of how Casa has affected you, I guess, largely. Yeah.
Well, first, thank you guys for having me. It's kind of an honor to be here and you guys.
Can I suggest that maybe
Yeah.
you sit
Right.
We're gonna put you right in the
Right in
middle.
the
We're
middle.
gonna
Here.
here.
Everybody can
We
see you.
made your wife do this too.
I'm flexible.
So we can see you.
Okay. Well, I guess when I started thinking about what I wanted to talk about and share, I guess I kind of want to give you guys a whole big picture and where Casa fits into my life and the life of our family, and we'll probably get into that towards the second half. But I wanted to just kind of start with where I come from and my background. I was raised in a family that my parents divorced when I was 3, and really neither of them should have gotten married. Neither of them probably should have been parents. You know, like looking back on it, it wasn't a very good situation. And when they separated, it was a lot of chaos, a lot of emotional damage towards me. And as a child, like I'm not even like consciously aware of what was taking place back then. It's just sort of happening, and you just kind of coping and dealing with the fallout and all of that stuff. And it was during that time that one of like the first kind of traumatic things happened to me. I was preschool age, 4 years old, when some babysitters took advantage of me, and it was the first time I've ever shared this publicly, and so not really like I didn't even mention this to anyone until 2 years ago when I was in therapy, and finally kind of came clean. But a babysitter, I think he was young. It's hard for me, like the memories it's a weird thing with this sort of thing with the memory, but ended up being pretty traumatic, and I never shared it with anybody, obviously not with my parents. They weren't safe people. There's a lot of damage from there. There's damage going on in my parents' conflict, and I spent the rest of my youth growing up fairly troubled, struggled into school. I'm a pretty intelligent guy. I don't have really high IQ, but had a hard time getting good grades because I'm bouncing back and forth between houses and all the stuff going on emotionally. I just didn't have the tools to apply myself, and so I was struggling in school, and that caused more conflict in the home. And it's just this sort of spirals, you know, like in my life it spiraled and kept getting worse and worse, and I ended up being abused sexually by a boy in our neighborhood throughout most of my childhood. Separate boy, never shared that with my parents. Started binge drinking when I was 11 years old. That's really young. Like it was a mess. I was a mess, and a lot of pain, and I just didn't know anything different. Like to me, it was just, this is how life is. This is normal. Went into high school, started smoking weed, started getting in trouble. I never got in trouble with the law, but could have on several occasions. And just running with the wrong crowd. By the time I graduated high school, just barely graduated high school. My life was a mess, and I had a friend of mine who was probably my best friend in high school, was living the same lifestyle as I had, and went and joined a missionary training program, and kind of like sobered up and started going on the life of like going overseas and helping kids, and college wasn't an option for me with my grades, and I thought, you know, I might as well remove myself out of the situation and try to get my stuff together. So I went to the missionary training program, and I met a young lady, and you guys met her last week, and all of that pain, all of that dysfunction, all of that inner turmoil, it's kind of like pushed down, and in the Christian missionary program, a lot of it is about what you do and just trying to appear a certain way. And so like I felt like when we connected to each other, it was simultaneously out of our wounds, but also like in a pseudo personality where we're acting towards each other like something that we're not. And so we connected and plunged headlong into like a really addictive, codependent, enmeshed, bad relationship. We're 19 years old, have all this unresolved pain. She did too. She comes from a very different, well, not all that different background from mine, but her life looked very different than mine. And we got married when we were 21. I was hitting her and throwing her around the house for the first 2 years of our marriage until she finally shared that with some people, and they tried to pull her out of the house, but it wasn't long before she moved back in. I swore it would never happen again and that sort of thing. And while after that, I never got physical with her again. I destroyed property. And like Deborah said, like when we got engaged a few months ago, she's like, "It's so crazy because you were like a real lifetime movie abuser." You know what I mean? And that's the best way that I could describe kind of our dynamic. And she wasn't healthy and she wasn't loving towards me. I was certainly not healthy and not loving towards her. Our relationship was really bad. And so what do you do when your relationship's really bad? You have kids. So we had our first son, Jack, and God, I loved him. I really did. In every way that I know how. I mean, like, Deborah just had a C-section. She's recovering in the hospital, and and Jack's asleep, and I'm outside, taking rips off of a pipe, smoking weed, and just like, I'm still in that place emotionally. Hadn't resolved any of my pain. Didn't have any idea what a healthy even looked like. Like normal this all seems very, very normal to me. And so we brought Jack home, and he's around the intimidation. He's around, like, I don't have any idea how to raise a kid. My dad didn't have any idea how to raise me. His father didn't, and so we're just repeating cycles, And then she got pregnant again with Brody, and so we had Brody 13 months later, and at this time, like, I'm pretty much stoned full-time. Crying kids will trigger me and get me angry, and so I'm lashing out. I never physically hurt either one of them, thank God, but I mean, it doesn't mean that they weren't traumatized. They certainly were. They were around my anger, they were around my screaming, they were around me punching holes in the wall and smashing holes in the wall with my head, and I mean, it's ugly, it's bad. And we sold our house. We owned a house, and we moved back in with my mom, and planned on moving to Carlsbad. It was like a dream of mine to move towards the beach, so I could surf and be happy, or whatever it was I thought I was going to get. And a couple days before we moved out there, out of my mom's house, back into a situation where it was just going to be her and me and the kids again, she dropped a bomb on me. She was reading a book called Why Does He Do That? About abusive male behavior, and it kind of like ripped the blinders off of her eyes in regards to our relationship, and she came out of denial about just how bad things really were. And so, like, I got blindsided. She took the kids back east to be with her family and trying to gather her thoughts for a couple of weeks, and I started reading Why Does He Do That Too? And that's when the blinders got ripped off of my eyes. And I know it's hard to think. I mean, it's hard to understand for a lot of people, I'd imagine, just how far into denial like an abusive person can be. But then you look at like Floyd Mayweather or like Adrian Peterson, who hospitalizes his son, and he's like, this is how you discipline a child, It's like it's normal to you. And so at that point, I realized just how abnormal it was and how abusive it was, but it was too late. Like, it was like, there was no way. She's putting up boundaries left and right. She wouldn't let me be alone with the kids. She gave me a list of like 8 people that had to be there. If I wanted to be with the kids for 2 hours a week, 2 hours twice a week, they had to be there with me. That's awesome. Like, she got really strong really fast after a long time of not, like, it's just like all that strength that she had inside of her just kind of built up and came all out at once. And I was like desperate to be like, I see now, like, we don't have to hurry back into anything, but I really authentically kind of had like an aha moment of like, this has got to change. And she was talking to a therapist who specializes in this stuff, and he's like, hey, I'm not saying that you guys should be getting back together. I definitely don't think that that's on the table for now, but if he's serious about trying to get better, he can join. There's a program that I've heard of called Life Skills, and so I'm like, sign me up, let's do this. And I get in there, and the first thing he tells me is I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. And Life Skills is kind of like a self-parenting recovery program where it helps you kind of deal with and understand the pain from your childhood, resolve it, and then equips you with tools on how to like function as a normal adult without resorting to your childish behaviors. And first thing he told me was like, the best thing that you can do is whatever she's asking. And she was asking me to leave her alone, and so I was, as hard as it was, I had to leave her alone. I wasn't calling or texting.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Calling or texting, I was giving her the space. Everything she was asking for, I was agreeing to. When she served me the divorce papers, I just said, whatever you want, you can have. Which ended up being really unfair to me, but I agreed to it because that's where I was at emotionally. I was just so desperate to try to make up or something for what I had done. And I started the recovery program, and I threw myself headlong into it, and started seeing a therapist and going back and revisiting a lot of the things from my childhood that were like these wounds that were kind of infected, and just getting in there and trying to do inventory and clean it out. And it's and there's a lot of pain and a lot of sorrow in that time, but that's kind of when I actually started engaging in a relationship with Jack and Brody, where now I'm really motivated and not to hurt them because I love them and I don't want them to be hurt, and we ended up getting a divorce, and I thought for sure our relationship, like on the day that the divorce was finalized, it was kind of like a day where I started moving my heart on to something else. Like, okay, so reconciliation, is it gonna work? How can we manage a friendship? How can we figure out a way to raise our kids as lovingly as possible? And I think that when I started moving on, that's when Deborah started like moving back towards thinking like maybe, like she ended up dating a guy that was a lot like I was before we separated. And she realized that there's a lot of things going on between her and I, and all the while, like, I really feel like that I started laying a foundation of like reconciliation with not just her, but with my boys as well. And we ended up finding Casa right about the time we started kind of like hanging out and spending time together and dating. And we were looking all over for a preschool, and we were just so scared that we were going to put them in a preschool that was going to shame them or not understand them acting out of some of their pain, because Jack had spent the first 2 years of his life, 3 years really, in like a really abusive situation. Brody, the first 1 to 2, and they were gonna act out and wanted a safe place for that. And just, where do you find something like that, right? And that's where Casa came in. Like she, I don't know how, I forget, I'm sure she's probably told me, but I forget how she found Casa, but she did, and she told me what you guys were about, that this was a situation for kids just like Jack and Brody, and that not only are they there to, with the teachers equipped to fully handle meltdowns and redirect them towards more positive behavior, but also a place where she and I can get equipped on ways that we could parent our kids better. And that was huge. And so not only am I in a recovery program, not only am I in therapy, but now I like, with Ian we started doing, and Miss Jenny, we started doing the PCIT, and they opened the door for me to come in there and sit down. And like Brody was really shut down. Like Brody was shut down to me. I mean, there's no other way. Like he'd cling to mom. Like he didn't, like when I would take him to the park and I try to play with him, he'd want to play by himself. And it was hard for me to let go of that and just understand where he was at. But through the PCIT, like I'd say that's like the most crucial piece to my relationship with my youngest was the PCIT that we were doing with him, where now like he adores me and I adore him. Like it's a really positive change. I mean, I can't communicate how strongly enough how positive the PCIT has shifted the dynamic between me and Brody. And while Jack is going through some stuff too right now, and Deborah and I are trying to figure out some ways to reach out to him and get closer to him and whatever he's going through right now, we were just talking about, okay, well, we can do PCIT with Jack on our own time and really start investing on bridging to him at his level and try to build that connection between him and us. That's something that we wouldn't have if it wasn't for Casa. It's just, it's a huge blessing what Casa has been for us, and the tools that Deborah and I have gotten as parents, the time that our kids have gotten to kind of like detox in a safe environment and have a safe place to go every day when we go to work, and come home and to use the tools and to build a much more healthy family environment. And I think about the generations and generations of dysfunction in my family, where my dad didn't have a father and his father didn't have a father, and my kids have a father, and not just a father, but a father that has the tools that I've gotten to connect to them, to be a safe place for them, to love them where they're at. It's kind of exciting to see what the kind of men they're going to grow up to be when they become adults, rather than like the almost hopeless situation that they were destined for before, you know. And Casa's been a big part of that, and so that's our story.
Wow.